Today on the PROLIFE podcast, the FDA has approved AI assistance for ultrasound techs to catch potential problems earlier before birth. What could go wrong? We should talk about this. Let's get started. Happy Thursday, PROLIFE family. Welcome to the table. Welcome me back to the table.
Welcome back.
It's been a while.
How are you?
It feels right, though. I like this.
You're like
back
a fan favorite, so
I don't know about all that.
We probably lost some audience.
Oh, man. Glad to have you back. They can all come back
now. I'm happy that family emergencies are behind me.
Yep.
So, appreciate the prayers, guys. So, we have... It's always weird. It's always weird. Why do you send the weirdest articles, Kim?
Hey, I don't make the crazy. I just point it out when we get here.
You just report the crazy.
Yes, exactly.
I don't make it up. I just talk about it. Cool. Well, if you'll introduce yourselves, friends.
Kim Schwartz, Director of Media and Communication.
Dr. John Sego, President of Texas Direct Life.
Dr. President, good to have you back. I'm Brent Klingerman, IT Director. It's been a while.
Right.
Does modern news just feel like a weird sci-fi movie trailer every time these days? Yeah. So we're now using AI to assist in decisions about ultrasound data, fetal ultrasound. Because, there's the second trimester appointment. We do all the ultrasound stuff. There's a lot of pictures they take. I've sat in the room for that 3 times. And, they're clicking stuff. And you're like, that looks cool. I have no idea what you're clicking and taking pictures of. And it looks like they're doing measurements and things. And now we've fed a whole bunch of data to an AI.
Yep.
And we're letting it help us find potential things.
Right.
And this is... good.
So there's this French company that's developed this AI kind of tool to help that process of like the sonogram tech going through each image and looking at certain measurements, looking at certain indications to see if there is some kind of anomaly, if there was some kind of health risk or concern. And so this French company just got FDA approval to bring to the States this tool that will assist sonographers. Now, the person is not going anywhere. They still have to confirm it all. But you've got this tool that's now going to make it easier to identify an anomaly or, kind of anything that's kind of a health concern for the child. And so, that was the news, is AI assisting in scanning of children for disabilities.
Yeah. And just like any tool, it can be used for good and helping detect, early problems with a pregnancy maybe. And, that early detection can actually help the parents have a healthier child later on. But with any tool, humans also use it for bad. We have a very, very terrible track record as a human.
We do.
As a human race, we have a very, very bad record with taking good things, and it's like, let's use them for the worst possible motives.
Yeah.
And so the concern is with this AI that if it's going to be used, like they intend it to be used pretty much universally, like in every pregnancy, not just ones that are high risk. And it's like, okay, we know we probably need to do some scans. They want to use this for every pregnancy.
Yeah.
And you can see how that could lead to more abortions, how, if more parents are saying, if this AI is saying that your child has a disability, and then many doctors will say, well, hey, I don't do an abortion, or maybe I can refer you out, things like that, where it's doctors pressuring families to have abortions on children because they have a disability, and how that is discrimination. That's wrong.
So according to the CDC, 1 in every 33 pregnancies, or one in every 33 children have some kind of defect at that stage. Okay, so that could be, and their definition of defect is very broad. Okay?
Extremely,
yes.
Yeah.
So it could just be that they're low weight. It could be that there's actually, seems like indicators for genetic, kind of anomalies that could lead to a disability. So it's like a very wide thing, but we're talking about 1 in 33, are going to be flagged. And right now, only half of children with these defects those defects are discovered before birth. So we're talking about half of the children who have these conditions are born, and then they find out at birth, okay, there was this defect or there was this, diagnosis or this concern. So we are talking about a lot more children that are going to be flagged to have these conditions ahead of time. And so it's just like you said, of like, what we do with that diagnosis is now the problem. I'm a big proponent for knowing things. Okay, like if there's something to be known,
as am I.
I want to know it. Okay, so like with our children, like because we get that question a lot, is like, should we do amnio? Should we do testing? All of these different kind of genetic testing, all the that we have now to see if our children has some kind of health condition. I'm a big proponent of yes, like learn as much as you can without like risking the child's health, without risking the mother. Like, let's know as much as we can about this child so we can prepare, not so we can, make quality of life decisions, not so we can devalue them, but so we can prepare better to be them. If my child, I have 2 children, we did the sonograms, we found out, their gender ahead of time. We, found out everything we could. We did all the testing. And if my child was going to have one of these disabilities, I would have wanted to know. I want to be prepared for it. I want my community to be praying for us and to be there to support us. Like, knowing is not the problem.
Right.
It's what we do with that knowledge is the problem. And so, is there anything inherently wrong with this? Other than your concerns, Brent, about AI in general and the robot.
It's a mixed bag.
Yes, the robot uprising. Other than that, okay, just on the pro-life side, there's nothing inherently wrong with it. It's just, like you said, are we capable of handling this?
Probably not. Humans have a very bad track record with using tools for bad purposes. And so we really got to pray that this won't lead to more abortions and that, hopefully that actually can help with maternal health, with the health of the children. Like, that would be awesome. But scientific community, you got to get your act together, please.
Yeah, I think because you think about interventions, there are a lot of interventions that you could do before birth. There are a lot of things, but there's still the misdiagnosis rate, even on these health defects, is so high still. Is even in the genetic testing, this conversation is going on at the genetic level of we know markers, we don't know causes. So we may know this marker is associated with that disability, but we don't know it's the cause. And so, there's just so much that we don't know. And so, it could be a good tool to know things as long as we don't assume that, we understand everything and we can, make the right recommendation. Okay, this child is going to have such a terrible life that it would be the most merciful thing to cause their death. That's where this logic could go. But it's interesting. I look forward to the day when we can have even more early interventions for these kind of disabilities. But we'll see.
I think it's very cool that we've developed a lot of tech where, there's surgeries that happen in utero. And they've fixed some really crazy stuff. Now.
Heart surgery. There's
a brain surgery recently, within the last year or so. Somebody did, I think it was at Boston Children's, did a brain surgery in utero.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It's who would have thought that would be possible?
So having more data and being able to identify things and do something in that way to save a life potentially or correct some things ahead of time. Awesome. The concern really is the quality of life decisions that people tend to go, well, if they're going to have this condition, I don't want them to have to live with it like that, or I don't want to be inconvenienced by this complicated problem. Hey, children are complicated. I have 3 normal ones, whatever that means. They're an adventure anyway.
Oh dear.
So
complicated.
Yeah. I think Kim,
good thing we're perfect, right? It's really nobody's perfect. Come on. You can't look at somebody else's life and be like, oh, that person's a disaster. Good thing I'm perfect. You're the problem in that situation.
I'm trying to remember which one of my kids it was. I might have been the first one that they're like, oh, we think maybe there's this thing with her kidneys. And it was in that second trimester. They're like, well, we'll just check on it later. Maybe it's a shadow. Maybe they're like, sometimes this stuff shows up, but we're talking about things that are this big.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to measure, and if you're off by half a pixel in the click, maybe not. And so they're like, just don't stress about it too much.
There you go.
And later they're like, yeah, it was nothing. But I'm scared of the kind of decisions that might be made based on that almost data.
Yeah.
That kind of fringe. You can almost tell.
Markers.
You can't. Yeah.
Yeah.
Markers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think, with any other like technology, and this is kind of just something we talk about a lot, is to make progress, like to try that brain surgery, to try the heart surgeries I was reading about earlier. Like, we have to be committed to life. Like, so, and this applies whenever we care for vulnerable patients who, are hospitalized, is in order to figure out how to treat their pain, how to come up with innovative ways to handle complicated situations, we have to have an underlying commitment to them. And that's what's so concerning about the euthanasia movement, especially in Canada right now, that's just accelerating, is it's kind of saying, okay, we don't know what to do for you. We don't know, you have a rare disease or a rare condition, or, we've tried all these things and it's not working. So we're going to end your life. Whereas the only way that this works with medical advancements and technological advancements is like, we try things. We are committed to you and committed to that patient and continue to try and pursue them. But that's why our country has gotten so far now, is we had this commitment to life. But if our technology just turns to better and more efficient ways to search and destroy, which children are we gonna, end? That's the kind of concern though, of that only will take us so far. And so it is. So when we look at all the marvels, kind of in the womb, surgery in the womb and stuff, it's only because somebody was committed to that child and said they're worth it. They're worth, trying to treat, trying to care for.
And anytime we accept abortion or euthanasia as a solution to these illnesses, we'll never move medicine forward or technology forward, because it's like, oh, well, abortion is the answer. We already have the answer. We don't need to look for other answers.
Yeah.
And just think about what all we would have missed out on if everyone had adopted that mentality. But instead, we've had that commitment to life. And so that's why we have amazing surgeries in utero. And this can keep going forward. Like, who knows what kind of technological advancements there's going to be, hopefully, in the decades to come, if we don't all screw it up right now with AI and what else.
Right?
So that principle leads to the second topic about the Zurowski case, a lawsuit going on in Texas, dealing with some of these situations. So the same principle is really important for the AI stuff, but also a lawsuit going on in Texas about our pro-life laws that we want to talk about.
Yeah.
Yep. So, when we come back, we have another story about a recent case, very complicated and complications. I'm concerned about these. I'm confused about it. John's going to answer my questions, but you will have questions too. We'll come back in a minute and we'll get to those. Texas Right to Life is facing 14 lawsuits from Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry. They're suing us because we helped pass the Texas Heartbeat Act, and they're trying to scare us pro-lifers into backing them. Please join us in the fight against Planned Parenthood and donate to protect the Texas Heartbeat Act. You can fight for the unborn and build a pro-life Texas that values every human life. Go to texasrighttolife.com/lawsuit to make your contribution. Every cent will help, and it's greatly appreciated.
Without warning, you or your loved one could end up in the emergency room, where every second counts and your medical wishes matter more than ever. However, if your loved one doesn't have the right medical documents on hand, they may not be able to make decisions for you in a crisis. My Life Angels solves all of this by walking you through step by step in creating these important medical documents and storing them online securely for you and your family to access at any time. The service is only $7 a month, but use the link in our description for 20% off your initial subscription period. Don't let strangers make life and death decisions for you. Get the My Life Angels app today.
Welcome back, friends. So there was a case. I'm a little fuzzy on the details because it's like, which things does this affect? What did happen? So there's a case with suing a doctor for abortion rights, and I'm confused.
They made a big mess of
it. It's such
They sure did.
I'm confused about this one. I just went, you know what, we're gonna sort it out on podcast because
Here you go. That's your job now.
So there's a lot of lawsuits. Just in the last 2 years, guys, there's been a lot of lawsuits. So I get it. Okay, so but this one is the Zerwowski case. Okay. Zerwowski case, it was filed earlier this year, and it's filed from 14 women in Texas who wanted to have an abortion and were unable to for some reason. Okay. So there are different medical circumstances, but 4 of the women had a condition we've talked about here a lot of PPROM. And so whenever a woman, pregnant woman, her water breaks early, way early in the pregnancy than is expected and is healthy. We had Dr. Scott on a couple of times to talk about these kind of medical emergencies. And so 4 of these women in the lawsuit had this. They went to their doctors, went to their hospitals, and the hospitals completely mishandled the case. Medical malpractice. They did not follow the medical standards. They didn't follow the law, but they said, we can't do anything for you. Okay, you're in this very dangerous circumstance. It's legitimate. You're early in your pregnancy. Your water has broke. You're going to be susceptible to infection. It's a very dangerous situation. Right. And these doctors said, we can't intervene. We can't do anything because of the pro-life laws. Okay, so some of them were doing it after their ethics committee said it. Some doctors just made the call themselves. One of the doctors had an attorney at the hospital tell them that. But for whatever reason, they said, no, you have to delay. A couple of those women went to other states. A couple of the women waited 48 hours, got worse, and then the doctors intervened. So different circumstances, but all about medical emergencies.
Right.
So there's some other cases we'll talk about in a second in that lawsuit. But so they use this lawsuit to blame the pro-life laws and say that your definition of medical emergency, your definition of abortion, do not give doctors the clarity they need to treat pregnant women in medical emergencies. So that was the Zerwowski case. I mean, these are heartbreaking stories. Yeah. It is not, they're not easy to read. Our legislative team was at the hearing. It was a couple of days of hearing. And I mean, if anybody is going to have compassion and sympathy for these women, it's like the pro-life movement is, you have a good thing, women, who are expecting, loving their children, wanting to care for them the best they can. And then, because of the fallen world, because sin, death, and evil have entered into the world, there is illness, and these women had these circumstances that threatened their lives, threatened their children's lives, and doctors completely mishandled it and then blamed pro-life laws for it.
Yeah, and I have to give a shout out to the media too, in a bad way, that this whole idea of women have to be at death's door in order to qualify for the life of the mother exception in our laws, that came from the media. That does not exist in our laws. And so because the doctors and even hospital attorneys, all of these people are hearing that, and they themselves read it like into the law. Basically, they're like, I don't even want to say that it's reading between the lines, because it's not even in between the lines. It's like it's projecting that belief onto the law, and so they're like, oh well, that must be the case, that if I'm going to do an abortion to save this woman's life, she has to be like at death's door, like right now. Yeah, and that's not true. Dr. Scott has said before, it's that the condition can be foreseeable, but not imminent. And that is, the media just they're more than happy to perpetuate that, because it makes our state look bad. And this idea that they're continuing this idea that we have to pit the life of the mother and the life of the child against each other. Yeah. And that's not the spirit of our pro-life laws. That's not the spirit of the pro-life movement. It's that we love them both. And sometimes you have tragic situations where only one will survive, that the child's not going to survive. And so we have to do whatever we can to save the mother in these difficult situations. And the answer is not well, let's just kill more preborn children in other circumstances. We need to grieve that child. We need to mourn for that loss, because we recognize in these situations. And shockingly, even the media recognizes in these situations that that's a child who is loved and who was, they'll say who was wanted. We believe that every child is wanted. But they recognize that this is a baby, that this is a life. And, but they're still trying to pit women against their children. And there is nothing more anti-woman than that.
Yeah, it's interesting. So we've been talking to medical students since Texas Heartbeat Act because this narrative was building in the media,
Right.
And so we've been going around the state, bringing experts like Dr. Scott. We've been presenting to them what our definitions actually are to medical students around the state. And I have on one of my talks, I have a timeline of when this phrase you used on death's door, and it started in New York Times. And then it got copied by the Atlantic, and then it was kind of, you can see, okay, it's being quoted here, and then it ends up in the New England Journal of Medicine in an op-ed there. And so if I'm just a doctor on the front lines trying to understand the implications of Texas, pro-life laws, and I'm reading a, once a reputable journal of medicine, and it says, oh, I can't get involved in a medical emergency case until the woman's on death's door. But that's it's not in law. It's not, no legislator said that from the floor. I mean, it's awful. And so that has really been one of the biggest things, and just disappointment in the media of they're not doing their job, and actually they're doing harm now.
Yes.
And so that's really a big concern. But that led to this narrative that these women are coming to, and we're not blaming the women. I mean, it was not their fault that their doctors were misled. It was not, even we have some doctors, we've heard from good doctors who really confused because their attorney at their hospital said, that this is what the law is. But they said, okay, your definitions are not sufficient. We're going to go to court and get an injunction that protects any doctor who wants to perform an abortion whenever there's a health concern.
Okay.
And so they brought this case, and then last week, a judge here in not here, where I live, in Travis County.
Sorry, man.
A Travis County judge gave them that injunction and said, okay, yes, you are protected. Okay. The state of Texas cannot prosecute any doctor who is performing an abortion in a medical, or he said a health condition.
The judge is a lady.
Oh, sorry. And
are you assuming her gender?
Based on their medical judgment. So any doctor can use their medical judgment to determine there is a health condition that requires an abortion. So huge loophole.
That is crazy broad. And we've been there before too. Like in 1973, when we got Roe v. Wade and the companion case Doe v. Bolton, it said, well, you can do an abortion for the woman's health. And it's like, okay, well, that kind of just means all abortions, because you can say her financial health, you can say her mental health, you can say her emotional health. In this situation, the definition is so broad that the doctor, as long as it's in their medical judgment of this is necessary, it's well, that's not a very clear definition.
And so that's what the legislature was responding to when they put this definition in law several years ago. Back in 2000, we had this debate in 2011, and then we had it again in 2013, is this definition of medical emergency was very clearly laid out because of that concern. Is we don't want to just say, hey, doctors, go figure out what you think is a health condition worthy of an abortion. We outlined it, and the law is very clear that if the woman's life is in jeopardy, or even if a major bodily function could be compromised.
So a serious injury, basically, death or serious injury. If that's coming, if you can foresee that.
Yeah, and that's what these doctors said, is they had, the presentation of PPROM, the water was breaking early, they knew this leads to infection. If we don't get involved, this is what's going to happen, okay? So it was foreseeable, but they said, no, you're not, it's
not imminent.
Yeah, it's not going to happen today, and so we can't act. So it's extremely frustrating because nobody wanted doctors to wait. And the law doesn't talk about a timeline. So that's kind of what's going on. The Attorney General, who is defending, the state of Texas in the case, the Attorney General's office immediately appealed, and they appealed to the Supreme Court of Texas. And they kind of used, and we were talking about this earlier, something we haven't seen in a while. They kind of used an odd motion that automatically stops the lower court's injunction. Okay,
Praise God.
They're saying it's so time sensitive and it's so complicated, we need to go directly to the Supreme Court of Texas, and we're going to use these motions, this very specific motion, to stop the injunction. So right now, as of the time we're filming this, the Texas laws that protect preborn children are fully in effect.
Okay. That was my big question when we started discussing this. I'm like, so what's our status? Heartbeat's in effect? The band's in effect?
Yeah. Everything is in effect right now. So Friday is when all of that happened. Mm-hmm. There was a little bit of confusion about it. And so this will have to be handled pretty quickly. So we'll see an update on this pretty closely.
Maybe between recording and when this episode drops.
We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
Hopefully soon.
The other concerning part of this lawsuit is that the women that brought these cases were not just women who were experiencing a medical emergency. Mm-hmm. This included the majority of the women in the case, 9 or 10 of them, had children who had disabilities, who had life-limiting disabilities, or just, kind of a health concern of the child, not the mother. Mm-hmm. And so these are categorically different types of cases.
Yeah.
Right? So you have the ethics of what do we do whenever the woman's, in a medical emergency. How do we handle that? How do we care for the child and care for the mother? Then you have another case where the mother is healthy. However, her child has some kind of disability, has some kind of, like we were talking about, defects, or there were some women who had twins, and one of the twins was looking healthier than the other. One of the twins had Down syndrome, and the others didn't. And so that mother said doctors recommended that they take the life of one of the twins to give the other a better chance. Or in some of these other cases that are in the lawsuit, this child had a life-limiting disability. They weren't expected to live very long after birth. And so it was recommended to them, let's go ahead and cause the death of the child as a more merciful condition or circumstance. That is categorically different than how do we care for this? So Texas law protects children no matter their disability. Mm-hmm. Okay, so no matter, even if the child is not going to survive, for very long after birth, Texas law still says, no, we give them chance. We give them the chance, and we protect their right to life. Mm-hmm. Kim, you just reminded me last week of some of the testimony that we heard.
I just posted them on YouTube on Saturday. Good. It will make you cry, so just be aware. But over the last few years in our legislative session, we would bring these women who were in this very situation, that they got very heartbreaking diagnoses when their children were in the womb, that this child is not going to live very long after birth. Mm-hmm. And I mean, just as a parent, like your heart immediately breaks, right? And so they talk about just that sorrow that they have. And every one of their doctors would say, hey, I don't do abortions, but I'll refer you out if you want to go, end this life and then start again, try again later. And all of these women, praise God, said no, just because, the doctor said that this child is incompatible with life, that does not mean that they forfeit their right to life. And that's so important to remember here, that life is short for everyone, that life is a gift for everyone. And because maybe one life is going to be shorter than someone else's, that doesn't give us human beings the right to say, well, we're going to end your life prematurely. Mm-hmm. We cannot do that.
Yeah, I think it's hearing these stories is tragic, but these women are talking about how, yes, they're grieving and it's an awful situation, but they don't regret, meeting their children, having those hours with them. Oh, yeah. And I recommend everybody go watch those, because they put it in perspective, and this happens with disabilities, and this happens when we're making end of life decisions as well, is I could say I've never been in that situation and I would never want to go through that situation. Mm-hmm. But so I could kind of be prejudiced and try to make a decision because I haven't faced that.
Right.
But listening to them and listening to their testimony of how it was actually healthy for them emotionally to yes, to grieve properly and to memorialize, but also to move on and, to be there and to be in a healthy place where they could have other children and be good parents to them. It's just a really inspiring and to see their commitment to, yes, life has these terrible sorrows, but we still respect other humans. And that's what's so heartbreaking for me is reading these stories of, just on one side, these women in the case, will talk about how much they wanted a child and then they didn't want that child.
Right.
And it's just heartbreaking to see that. But they're also in this lawsuit with the medical emergencies. And so the Travis County judge added that to the injunction.
Just straight up rewrote Texas law by herself.
So we don't have any exceptions for children who have some kind of disability. But the judge said also there's an injunction that any doctor who wants to do an abortion for a child who has a disability, that works as well.
I think everybody sympathizes with that situation because we can imagine just how heartbreaking it is to receive that news that, this life that I envision for my child that I'm going to have decades and decades, like basically they're going to live my entire life. That's what you imagine.
Yeah.
And to find out that's not going to be the case, that this child, you might get a few more weeks with them, you might get a couple more months with them, depending on whenever you get this diagnosis, and just everybody's heart breaks. And so these people who say, well, abortion is your answer, it's because they want to avoid, that pain and that suffering. And that's reasonable to want to avoid that pain because we know that that's a very heartbreaking and terrible situation. But the answer where we disagree there is not in the sympathy that we have for these women. Everybody has that sympathy for these women and these children. But the response is where we disagree, that ending that life, introducing this evil of abortion is not the answer. That is not the compassionate response. Let's look for something better, like what we talked about earlier with anytime we accept abortion as an answer, some kind of evil like that as an answer, we are not honoring that human life, and we're not progressing as a society.
Yeah.
And so there actually is a compassionate response to these cases. And the women that we talked about in that YouTube video that will make you cry, they talked about perinatal palliative care and how, once that baby is born, no matter how long you get with them, whether that's, maybe an hour, maybe there was one, I think, Abel Speaks, I think he lived for about 36 hours or so maybe. And so you're not looking at a very long time, but every single moment, those parents say that child was loved and held, and, they bring in photographers to capture those precious moments. And you really just have to go watch the video because it will make you sob, knowing from experience. But yes, that is the compassionate response, to really embrace the love that we have for life and not to cut it short.
Yeah. And that's one thing we've used a legislation to highlight, and this bill hasn't passed yet, but we still have several legislators who are working on, this is a new area of medicine, perinatal palliative care, sometimes called perinatal hospice. And this is something that the state of Texas can promote, to make sure that these resources are, known about, because a lot of people don't know that this is out there. There's groups that we partner with that's kind of like their main goal is to support these families in those circumstances and connect them with, people and doctors who can help with the palliative care, with the hospice, to, care for the child, care for the mother, in these tragic situations. But that is such a better way of handling this, of embracing the life, even if it's not going to be a long one. So that's involved in the lawsuit as well. That was also that caveat that the judge created was also on hold from the AG's motion. So we'll watch this case carefully for to see how it impacts mothers who have the medical emergencies, but also children with disabilities.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting we went to court to fight laws about a definition that was already defined in law. and a judge made up new definitions.
Right.
Yeah.
And now, thanks to a super secret extra double appeal with special sauce, that's all on pause. And the Supreme Court the Texas Supreme Court
Right.
is going to decide whether or not the judge did the right thing here in
Just on
inventing new definitions on something we've already defined.
Yes. Yeah. So the Supreme Court's going to go back to the injunction. The case is going to keep going. There's still some steps in the case at the lower level, but the Supreme Court of Texas is going to decide whether that injunction gets to go back in.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're going to keep following this. So we have a great ledge team that's been there at all the trials, reporting on it. So we have a lot of details on our website about the lawsuit. But yeah, this is something that we want to take seriously. I mean, this is something we should care about as pro-lifers for both categories. For children with disabilities and for these mothers and these medical emergencies. So we do care about this. There's some other things that the ledge team is working on. Maybe you can have Rebecca and talk about those related to medical emergencies and making sure we can connect what the law actually says to those doctors who are on the front lines. Because there has been misinformation out there. There has been confusion. And so there are a couple of things that we're working on with some of our partners to make sure we can connect that and make sure doctors aren't confused.
Right.
Yeah.
We got to do their job for the medical associations, for the media, because they are not doing their jobs. So we'll just be here to pick up the slack.
Unfortunately, that's where we are. Is we care enough about this, and typically medical associations help out, connect the dots between law and practice. They're not doing that here, and so there are a lot of good efforts to kind of fill in that gap.
Yeah. So definitely praise the Lord and be in prayer because we've already seen the fruit of the prayer here because from Friday when this ruling came down, there was a real possibility that this injunction would continue to block Texas medical emergency definition as written and that there would be a risk of babies with disabilities being aborted between now and whenever the Supreme Court of Texas rules. But because the Attorney General used the super special motion with secret sauce or whatever, I think that's the correct
I'm sure that's the technical term.
name. Yes. So that's already like an answered prayer right there that the injunction is not in effect right now. And so be in prayer for the Supreme Court of Texas to uphold our law as written and know that this is not, that rewriting the law, especially not legislating from the bench, is not the solution to this confusion that doctors have, that clarifying that confusion is actually the answer there.
Right.
Cool. Well, thank you. I feel like I understand what's going on now.
Okay. Oh, hopefully.
When we started this conversation this morning, I was like, I'm not sure I followed all of that. Which case? What happened? Which laws? Okay, good. Our laws are in effect. The case is still happening, but the Supreme Court's going to make a decision about the injunction, and the case keeps going, doing its thing. Okay, I feel like I know what's happening now.
Good.
Can you share this with your doctor friends so they know what's happening too? Please, and thank you. Mm-hmm. Friends, thank you for watching. John, thank you for being here. Again.
Always.
And thank you for joining us from all the way in from Austin.
Yeah.
Always a joy to have you here. Talk to your friends, share with your family. Like, heart, subscribe, all that, you know that
what
stuff.
to do.
But this is how we're going to save the lives, change the world, right? So, you have work to do. Share this video especially with your doctor friends so they won't be confused like I was when we started. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.